Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about how we can move from the early phase of planning your essay draft, including developing that working thesis statement, getting first early idea about how you'll structure your essay using an outline to help you think that through, and beginning to draft an introduction. I'm going to help you think about how you can make your own choices about what kind of essay you want to write, how you want to bring your reader in, engage your reader, and these choices are up to you. It will depend on what kind of essay you want to write and what kind of audience you have in mind. So let's begin by looking at the example that I've shared with you from Rules for Writers. It's a generic kind of example, and by generic I mean it's of a particular genre generic. So it's a kind of example of a very general type of the college essay. It's good in that it helps us think about things that essays can and should do, engage readers, right? For example, um, we can take a look at how this stages that. The opening question engages readers. We establish some kind of sense of a debate, or we might say a research conversation. Um, there is an introduction that leads into a clearly stated thesis. Okay, these are good things, and these are things we want to keep in mind. But this is important. Um, as you're doing this, there are many different possibilities, right? Here are a few strategies for drafting an introduction. Right? Start with a surprising statistic, ask a question, introduce a quotation, establish common ground with readers, provide historical background, define a key term or concept, point out a problem, contradiction, or dilemma, use a vivid example or image, right? They give you one example here of a way to begin your introduction or begin your beginning, right? Which is to think about um, this idea of a hook, right? And so let's take a look at that and then think about different possibilities for your own essay, right? So this idea of a hook, um, introductions are often called hooks because their purpose is to capture the attention of readers and give them a reason to say, yes, I want to read your essay. Your introduction will usually be a paragraph of 50 to 150 words. In a longer paper, it may be more than one paragraph, and it will include your thesis statement. Okay, so note, although there are functions that we want to fulfill, there's not a single formula that tells you exactly, oh, your paragraph should be this long, or it should hook people in this one way. It's giving you ideas of different things that you should try to do, but recognize there are different ways to do them that will depend on many factors. All right, so for the essay you're writing, you'll want to think about your own set of unique factors, right? We'll talk more about that in a minute, right? But try to avoid, general openings, formulaic openings. That might mean things that you have repeated or that somebody told you before is the right way to do it. Often, that's useful to a certain extent, and then it becomes less useful as you advance and become a more sophisticated writer. So don't lean back on whatever your high school teacher told you or anything like that. That might have worked for a high school teacher audience, but you want to think about a broader, more sophisticated audience moving forward. And of course, we looked at this one example. An effective way to hook readers is an engaging question. Okay, great. And that's the example we have here. But note again, many possibilities. Now, I want to get into an example of how different possibilities might work. All right. So let's take a look at a very different example. So once again, there are many ways to write an essay, many ways to begin. Rules for Writers gives us one example, but it's not a universal template for the academic or college essay. It's a good model for one kind of essay, a kind of generic essay, but it's up to you as a writer and as somebody who is becoming a more um, sophisticated writer to understand and determine what's your intended purpose. What is your intended audience? What is your focus, your specific focal topic, that exhibit or thing that you're going to analyze and show your reader, and your frame or framework, right? An interpretive, rhetorical, and an argumentative framework. That should say argumentative. I repeated interpretive there, to create your analysis and argument. So by interpretive, we just mean how do we understand the thing that we're looking at? How do we interpret it? We might interpret it through a historical lens. We might interpret it by thinking about gender and politics, if it's appropriate. We might interpret it thinking in terms of economics and economic theory, and maybe a particular economic theory, right? We might interpret something in terms of socioeconomic status or a class, right? We might interpret it in any number of different ways. And we want to be aware of that and show our readers what our interpretive framework is. And that ties into the rhetorical framework. And rhetorical here means how you seek to, effectively persuade your readers to come on board, to think along with you, to accept that you are qualified to present them with this information and argument, and they might disagree with you. They might come from a different background or orientation or mindset, but you have the tools to persuade by making appeals to reason, to emotion, right, to logic, to appropriate authority, right, by citing authoritative sources. You have ways to engage the reader and then structure your argument and present your analysis, right? So the analysis is then focusing on representing the thing that you're studying and want to show your reader something, right? About how does this work? How is it structured? What are its components? And then the argument that you want to make about how we should think about this, or what we should do about a particular problem, or whether or not we're missing some important element when we think about a problem, and so forth. And the argument it's a broad term, argument. Sometimes an argument is simply trying to persuade a reader to notice something that is often overlooked, to suggest that it's important to rethink something from a different perspective without maybe a big, strong final point about how we should do something or what we should do. Sometimes an argument, though, is much stronger in terms of this is a real problem and here's what we need to do. Here's a clear statement of action or a change in how we think. But just think in terms of persuasion, right? And that's rhetoric, persuasion. And we want to ground our persuasive work in this kind of essay, no matter what, in a combination of logical, rational argumentation with sources that are strong sources, whether they're, because we make an appeal to authority and people say, oh, that's an expert that I can trust. This data makes sense because it comes from a trustworthy place and process, or perhaps also, right, appeals to our common sort of sense of emotion, morals, right, ethics, right, things that we share as human beings. Maybe we feel or think differently in many ways, but ultimately there's a big common ground, right? You'll get a lot of people to sort of say, yeah, that's wrong, or that's right, or that feeling that you're including in part of your presentation, if you make that kind of an appeal to emotion, makes sense to me too, right? I'm a human being, and I feel that this is a problem, and now please persuade me with some evidence, show me more, right? So you're always thinking about how you want to sort of balance these factors. And don't come to me or anyone else and say, what's the secret formula, right? There's no secret formula. There are a lot of tools and methods and approaches that you can try out that might work for you or might not work for you, right? And you can develop over time a better and better and better sense of yourself as a writer. And writing incorporates reading and research, right? So that's what you need to do, right? Take that idea on board that nobody's going to tell you what to write and how to write it. And if they do, they're probably, I would be skeptical. What people can do is help you understand what good writing can be, how it works, and how you yourself can begin to develop a sense of yourself as a writer who has these tools and approaches and methods at your disposal and that you can learn from other writers as well. All right. Another thing, you need to figure out what you actually care about as you develop a topic, a project, a paper, why it matters, right? So what? Why does it matter to you? Like to you, not your idea of what you think I want or my opinion is, not your idea of whatever previous teachers or parents or whoever, whatever, previous sort of sources of here's how and why things are important. You might agree with those people, that's fine, and then it's your argument. But, try really to sort of think, why does this matter to me? So you can show your reader how and why it matters, and why it should matter to them, why they should take your view seriously, and then think about the best way to engage your readers, right? And this means a way that feels true to your own ability and interest in this, right? Don't try to, say, oh, I should do this kind of an intro because that's the way you're supposed to do it, even though I don't feel engaged or interested. If you don't feel engaged or interested, there's a problem, right? Find a way to engage yourself. And then hold your reader's attention. And this idea of the hook is something we'll look at more in a moment, okay? Present your argument in a clear, concise way. That's your thesis statement. Another typo on my hastily composed slide, but the ideas are all there. Okay, to help us think about this research paper project, research and writing in general, I'm going to return to a topic and idea that I presented in class several weeks ago, just as a model for helping us think about this, right? You're all doing different topics. You've all got different interests. You've all got different possible academic paths before you, different majors in mind. So we're covering a lot of territory potentially as we think about each and every student's topic. I chose to think about my dog, if you recall, and thought about how I became interested in this idea of dogs, right, in a general sense, and in a sense about how and why we're so kind of emotionally attached to dogs and lap dogs in general, and then thinking about lap dogs or small dogs in Shanghai and China. It led me to start to think about the idea of the pandemic puppy, a phenomenon where people adopted or bought or otherwise obtained puppies. There are also COVID kittens, right? But people getting pets during times of lockdown during the pandemic. And then often keeping them, but sometimes not, finding that people can't keep them. And then that can be bad for the dog. We're also thinking about then how you develop a sharper frame, right? A sharper line of inquiry. And then you begin to move into your thesis. So today, what I'm going to do is show you how that might look in a couple of different cases, not telling you how you should do it, but showing you that there are different ways to do this work and that you have a lot of freedom to think about how you want to do it for yourself. So this will be the end of this short video, but there will be a second video along with this that walks you through a process of seeing me develop a topic where I begin actually with a title, just an idea from lockdown to locked out, the plight of Shanghai's pandemic puppies, right? I don't know, post-COVID. maybe I get rid of that, right? But the idea here is very basic, right? And you can see I'm just using this template that I adapt and refine as I begin to draft. And then I arrive, you'll see, at a very different place in a draft where my title is very different. I'm thinking about an entirely different topic in some ways, but it's very deeply related. It's not entirely different. It's just that my focus is shifted. I'm still thinking about dogs and humans' emotional relationship to dogs, the pandemic, Shanghai, and a kind of the emotional crisis and trauma of going through a lockdown. I'm thinking about all those things, but my research has shown me a new path and helped me establish a new focus. So the next video will take us from that initial idea of sort of lockdown and actual puppies like my guy Shadow Bao, right here he is, to thinking about where I get with this idea of what are called carton dogs. In translation, we're talking about this idea of 知和国国, right? So this is what you'll see my topic evolves into. All right, so that's the next video. And in the next video, I'll talk more about two different ideas or approaches for developing an introduction or a hook for an essay like this. All right.